Can you confirm for me that that's up?
Yeah.
Wonderful. And you can hear me loud and clear?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Awesome. All right, we'll just leave that up for a moment as we get ready. Good morning, everyone. We'll make a start in just 1 minute as we roll into the afternoon. We'll just wait for a few final people to join us. It's great to have you here this morning. So I'll start off. My name is Justin Nowak. I'm the head of Lower Campus here at ISM, and I'm very proud to present to you today on a topic that I'm very excited about, and that is STEAM, or MIT-style learning. I actually asked to be the presenter of this one because I'm so excited about it. So without any further ado, let's make a start. We'll start off by introducing you to STEAM at ISM and maybe touch on a few of the changes that have been happening recently thanks to Nord Anglia's collaboration with one of the world's leading universities in MIT. One of the first things that happened when we became members of the Nord Anglia family here at ISM, they introduced us to some of our collaborations, and MIT was one that really caught my eye. And in one of our very first seminars, I ended up in a room receiving some training from people over from MIT, and it's really helped move a lot of our practice forward and shape some of the things we do here at ISM. Let me talk with you about a few of those things, and I'll start off by referring you to a statement that is on MIT's front page. I find this very interesting when they say at MIT, they revel in a culture of learning by doing. Our students combine analytical rigor with curiosity, playful imagination, and appetite for solving the hardest problems. And the thing that I find really interesting about this statement is that you could easily apply it to any primary school or even nursery, secondary, these principles are very universal. So we could easily change that to read ISM. And we're trying day by day to develop our skills in all of these areas and make sure that the education we provide for children is an education based around action, those things that they're born with, that natural curiosity and playful imagination. And we like to challenge them to use those skills to solve hard problems while maintaining all the things that we've come to expect from an education here at ISM, with that analytical rigor, those base skills that we develop so well in our core subjects. So let me talk with you a little bit more about these things. First of all, actually, I want to mention, here's an interesting stat when we were researching this that we dug up. If you look at 5-year-olds today, and if you look at the percentage of jobs they'll have in the future that don't currently exist, think about this: 60% it's projected of jobs that 5-year-olds will have don't exist right now. And not only that, if you think about it, they'll be entering the job market when they're about, let's say, 21, 22, 23, as they're graduating from university, or perhaps even earlier. And they'll be in that job market for another 40 years likely. So that's only, 18 years from now. And they'll be in that job market for another 40 years. So even the job that they retire from might be completely unrecognizable to the types of employment that exists when they start working. So the types of people who will be successful are those who are adaptable, flexible, able to think on their feet and solve problems at a very rapid pace. So as the world evolves around them, they are the ones who will be in the best position to be successful, to be confident, and not lose their cool even as the world changes all around them. In fact, they'll be able to take the lead on those changes. So when we talk about perhaps a traditional education of the past, this is what we call the empty jug approach. Maybe if you were in education 30, 40 years ago as a student, the teachers might see the students as empty jugs they need to fill up with information around the world. And to be fair, a lot of the mechanisms we have today where children can access that information didn't exist. I remember my year 5 teacher telling me that true north is slightly different to magnetic north. And he was correct, but I had no other way except for to take his word on that. And so we just had to pass along those facts. History was focused a lot around memorizing dates. Maths was about memorizing certain procedures and ways of doing things without exploring alternatives. And let me tell you, that model of education is dead. It's not sufficient to prepare children for tomorrow. The reason being because the types of jobs and technology they need preparation for, we can't even envision at this point in time. We'll need to prepare them in such a way that when those technologies and jobs do come about, they're able to prepare for them on their own, on the spot, and becoming outstanding learners is a way that we can help them do that. And STEAM is a key plank in how we can prepare them to do that. Let me talk about that a little bit more. Firstly, I'll introduce you to what STEAM actually stands for. It's an acronym for science, technology, engineering, the arts, and maths. And there are a few principles that underpin our new approach to these subjects. First of all, we integrate them as much as we can. So we don't treat them as we necessarily always have in the past, as individual skills discrete from each other to learn. Of course, we know in the real world, you don't only do maths at one time, completely separate from engineering. These skills often combine. And so we're always looking for opportunities in the classroom to combine and integrate these skills together so that children get used to working with them side by side and overlapping with each other. The next principle is student-led exploration. So we have to look at to what extent students are able to make decisions about what they're learning, about how they will approach and resolve problems and things like that. So we look for opportunities to give them a bit more leeway than in the past, as I said, historically going back into education, where we gave them very precise instructions on how to do things, and this is the way it was done. Now we like to practice their skills in developing their own knowledge, those learning skills, and making decisions where it's possible and appropriate. And the third principle is real-world problem solving. In education, we might call this contextualized learning, where we put the learning that they're doing, place it in a context, and give it a bit more meaning. I like also to call it real-world problem solving. Often the children can solve real-world problems, setting up sports tournaments, raising money for certain charities or doing things for the environment. Things like that have come up where the children have really come up with a lot of the solutions to the problems themselves. And the more practice we're able to give them at this, the more skilled and prepared they'll be for the world of tomorrow. So that is STEAM learning in a nutshell, but let's see what it looks like in action. Here are some really cool pieces of art, and this is an example of what it doesn't look like in action, actually. My son is at a pre-nursery, and he does pieces of art like this. And of course, we all do in school sometimes where, you know, we're working with shapes, we're doing a bit of early mathematics, and the children all work on a very similar piece of art. We give them very clear instructions, and they all work on these things together. So, you know, they all turn out with pieces of art that look very similar. And I do believe there's a certain place for this in education, you know, where the children are guided and supported in their understanding of shapes and how they work and their knowledge. But this isn't quite STEAM learning. So let's contrast that with some other things. Let's start off with our younger learners. And here's an example of one of my favorite activities from this year so far. Here's Dahlia from nursery, and what tremendous time she's having making her house. This occurred during STEAM week, appropriately enough, and the children were tasked. We were learning about extreme weather. So the children had the special task of creating their own house that would be able to keep Lego figures dry inside. And the STEAM materials were laid out in a corner of the room. The children have been trained to access and use them whenever they wish. So this is very young children who know how to pour out paints for themselves, who know where they can find scraps and bits around in that area like boxes and straws and things. And they've become very skilled at using scissors and tape and things to make their own constructions. It doesn't look quite as neat and tidy as some of these things that might have occurred under teacher direction, but it's very much their own. They show elevated levels of pride. They invest themselves tremendously into their own work. And in nursery too, they have a great deal of control. It was Dahlia's own decision when she could go to that place, when she wished to work on her house. And as you can see, she's very proud of what she's putting together there. That's what the table looks like as well. I did mention about, you know, sometimes it doesn't quite come off as neat and tidy. I'm sure you might have had children coming home during STEAM week with odd looking contraption from odds and ends. But when you ask them about them, a great deal of thought has gone into them. So if we keep moving forward here, you can see here are some of Dahlia's classmates here. We've got Maya and we've got Lucas, and they've made their own. You can see also that variance in the way that they've solved the problem. They have very different looking houses and very different looking houses from Dahlia. And they want to test them. So we took them over to a testing site where they could spray them firstly with a fine mist that would represent some light rain. And then we tested to see if the people inside, the Lego figures inside, were keeping dry. And then, of course, we used a colander to pour over some heavy rain over the houses. And you can just see, look at how much everyone is invested in the success of these projects. The teacher didn't tell them how to do it or what materials to use. They learned to make their own decisions, and how proud they were. You could just see them looking up and smiling when they realized they'd achieved it and kept their figures dry. And that theme spreads across all ages on the campus. It's a type of playful learning, you can say. This here is a photo of an activity that took place in a year 3 classroom. They had a narrative that went with it, and they had to rescue, I think it was refugees from the top of a building in flood times, and they had to transport them across to a hospital along a rope while keeping them safe. And it was very difficult because it was down an incline. So they tested their vehicles, they slid them down the rope. Some didn't make it across. They had too much friction as they went across. And some raced along much too fast and crashed at the end. And there was one interesting exchange I witnessed that really brought it home to me, the value of these sorts of activities. A child had a contraption, had some Lego figures on top again, rolled it down, and the front part of it smashed. So the teacher was like, oh no, there wasn't enough friction. Your vehicle was damaged. And the child responded, oh, I meant for that to happen. I designed it with crumple zones. They realized that if they had crumple zones at the front of their vehicle, that could take the force of the impact, and the people inside the cage would be safe, which did happen as well. Like, the figures didn't fall out of their vehicle. Everything was safe. But just the fact that they'd put that kind of thought into it, it took a great deal in the real world to come up with the concept of crumple zones. And this child had learned the vocabulary, had learned to apply the concept to their own project. And that's exactly the sort of vocabulary and thinking that we're promoting through these different types of activities. You can also see there's great opportunities for children to collaborate and share what they've learned. You know, that child went away and immediately told their friends about how their design work, and some people adopted their designs. But you can just see when they're researching and finding things out, it really attracts a crowd, and they learn off each other just as well as they might from a teacher. The teacher's always around to guide them and prompt them and provide them with these little provocations, like the narrative that led up to this design story. But they really learn a lot of each other as well, and you do see a great deal of communication. So if you look at these types of STEAM projects that we do in class, on top we have a board game. Down the bottom we have, that's Woo Hyun. He's designed a bionic hand where the children like threaded tendons through mini straws and were able to make their hand clasp around things using that design. And down below they had to design vehicles, and they were programming them using iPads. And you can begin to see how different activities that follow those principles are very fertile ground for developing students into outstanding learners via our success skills. So when you talk about courage, independence, our success skills of creativity, self-discipline, resilience, reflection, and communication, you can really see how STEAM activities provide the most amazing and the most fertile grounds for children to develop these things in ways that would not be possible had we simply directed them on how to design a board game, or how to build a vehicle that can cross over a zip line, or indeed how they should build a house that would be best to protect people in cases of heavy rain. When they have to design it for themselves, when they have to make those decisions, that's so much the better for our success skills, and the children become better learners and better able to survive that type of future that we spoke about earlier. So that's what happens when you apply these three principles of combining skills, of having student-led exploration, and real-world problem solving. So let's move forward then and see how we can apply this in our own homes. And I've had a bit of experience with this myself recently. I'm learning just as much as any other parent. So I'll share with you a few of our recommendations and a little bit of my own story as well. So let's take a look at this. Principle number one that I'd recommend is let the child take the lead as much as you possibly can. So have a careful think about your children. Sometimes they're not always interested in the things that we'd like them to be interested in. I was tremendously interested in Lego when I was a child. It was wonderful for me. And I'm waiting for the day when my son will be interested in Lego, but he's not as interested in it as I'd like him to be. He does take to it for a while and then just gives it a pass. And I'm secretly disappointed because I'd love to get back to my youth and build things out of Lego as well. But as I'll show you a little bit later, he's developed his own interests, and I've found much more success in following his interests more than my own desires of what his wishes might be. So be as flexible as you can. Let them take ownership as much as is practical and possible, and seek out opportunities for further learning, like museums or things like that, or providing them with the resources where they can just take it that one step further, and they'll dive right into activities like that as well. As long as you keep fueling it, their interest will grow. So that's principle number one, letting child take the lead. Number two, inspire curiosity and exploration, and do what you can to keep inspiring it and keep that natural sense of interest and desire to learn in your children as well. When I interview people for the school, one of the key questions that I always ask teachers is, how do you keep alive a child's natural desire to learn? And we may well ask ourselves that same question as parents too. What are we doing to keep alive a child's natural interest and curiosity in learning? Are we putting them in a box and giving them set ways to do things? Or are we opening up the world for them and showing them how their learning can apply to the real world? So you can just get in the habit of asking them questions. What do you hear? What do you see? How could this problem be solved? Why do you think that? How could we improve on this? And what would you choose to do in this situation or that situation? There are so many interesting questions to ask. And of course, we should be patient. It's very difficult when our children go through that age of just asking so many questions. But what a pity when they grow out of it. Or perhaps it's us as parents who become a bit less patient. But let's as parents encourage them to think through these questions and not just to give them straightforward answers, but maybe guide them into how they can answer their own questions. Where can they find that information? What tests can they conduct to figure that out? And I think that's a very worthy thing that parents and teachers alike can do. And when our children grow up with that, they'll be all the more powerful. And here's a key one where I'm making a lot of progress myself. Recognize STEAM resources, recognize them when you see them. How often have you had it with very young children where you buy them a nice gift, you think they'll enjoy it, and they end up playing more with the box than they ever do with the gift itself? I've seen that a few times. And in the moment, you can be frustrated, but seize the opportunities. A box can just as easily be a rocket or a television. Those children in the picture there are having a lot of fun with odds and ends. They'll figure out soon enough they'll need to hold those tin cans tight and taut for that telephone to work well. But I'm sure they'll explore and they'll start to figure it out. But you know, I was looking for a New Year's present, a Christmas present from my son, and I got to looking through so many toys that looked amazing and colorful. You know, I love these ramps for cars and things like that. But I did see one where you put in your car. It was great. It was battery operated, and it just has a machine in it that flings the car around and around a circuit. But then it occurred to me, how much is my son actually doing with this car ramp? You know, once you build it and put the car in, that's it. It's pretty much done. And your role is just to watch it after that. And not all toys are born equal. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do love that toy. I may buy it for my son for Christmas. But we just have to recognize what is and isn't a STEAM resource. STEAM resources are ones where children can manipulate it themselves. So you might get a car track with a jump, and maybe you could throw a book under there and have the ramp at different heights. What's the record number of cars that this car flung forward could leap over? And how does changing the angle change how many cars you can leap over, how many Matchbox cars you can line up and move over? And now we're starting to get into some STEAM activities where the child has the control and can make scientific decisions. Here are some other examples of open-ended toys and tools that you might wish to provide with your children. Everything from paint, and as I mentioned before, even the 3-year-olds at our school are trained how to take the paints out and to put their coat on so they don't make too much of a mess. You know, Lego is a great open-ended one. There's plenty of electronic resources, or even a microscope or a magnifying glass. The world of bugs, or even what goes on down in the grass at the dacha, is tremendously interesting. If you know, you get down low, get on your knees with a magnifying glass and take a look at it. Bugs are frightening creatures if you blow them up 100 times and take a peek at them. And sometimes children's natural curiosity will take over if we just provide these open-ended toys and tools. But it's all a case of like recognizing them when we see them. I have a train track for my son as well. And I like to build him like really cool tracks that are just very symmetrical. They go in a loop or a nice figure of 8, maybe over a bridge. And I realized when I let him actually build things, he didn't like that as much. He likes dead ends. And, you know, I almost don't like to look at the tracks because they don't exactly make sense as you would design a proper train track. But it is very interesting seeing him make decisions, put little roadblocks on the train tracks and set it up in all different kinds of way, and then test a train and see what impacts it can put up with or how it will navigate them. And that's when we're getting more onto STEAM activities. Resources as well. You know, in each of our classes, we have what we call like tinker trays or STEAM trays, where we just make odds and ends available to them. I was insulating my balcony one time, and I had these insulation tubes. And actually, even compared with like shiny, colorful plastic things, my son had so much fun making these tubes into tunnels and sliding a car down the tube and seeing if he could make it spin across the room at the end in different angles and ways. And sometimes we just don't realize how entertaining a pine cone and some sticks might be, especially if they have some tape and some glue, some beady eyes or things like that. So you might want to keep those boxes a while longer if you have them, or put together a tinker tray or a science tray together with your children, one that's very open to interpretation for them, and what can they make out of it, or some more of their interests might reveal themselves. I'm not saying they'll be interested in it all the time, but to have them available to the children, that's the number one thing. I was reading some research recently, actually, about healthy eating. And they said, if you want your children to be more healthy eaters, the number one thing you should do is make that healthy food visible and available to them as snacks. So have like a plate of carrot sticks or cucumber sticks on a table, and they'll be much more likely to come up and graze on them than if they were hidden away and they had to ask for them. And I think the same principle holds true for things like STEAM resources. They may not choose them all the time. They might choose the shiny plastic toys, but if you have them there and available, And if they start to show off what's possible, and if you honor their, at first they might be clumsy creations with a special spot on the mantelpiece, or if you take photos of them and put them up in the wall, they might inspire the next mini project, and you could make a bridge that they test for strength, and then if you honor that, make a place on the wall for their super strong bridge that they made out of dry spaghetti, let's say. I think they'll really appreciate that, and they'll realize that what they're doing is very important. And once they have access to these available, children really have the freedom to solve problems in a variety of ways with a variety of resources. And you will see it when it really goes well, you'll see their investment come into it. We had some children at our school who were reluctant speakers, a little bit shy, but I'll never forget when we had our first theme day, our first theme week, and the exhibition at the end, when children could stand by their projects and explain. Their task was to make schools of the future. And when they actually made their schools and presented them, the depth of thought that went into them and the different ways of interpreting that project. One child had made a school of the future that prioritized the environment, plenty of green zones, and even, zoos for rescuing endangered animals. Another child with a darker image of the future had made sure there was a bomb shelter underneath their sports stadium, but they could each talk about them at length and how they'd reinforced them and protected them and made sure that they were a pleasant environment for the animals. And they were just so proud that their communication skills rocketed up. Here we have a couple of students. This was very interesting. My last tip for you is to provide the time and the space. It's always a temptation for us as parents to really structure every hour of the children's day. I know a lot of students at the school, they go and do that extra tutoring, or they go and join a football club, or they have tennis lessons, and those things are very, very worthy. But we must make sure that we do provide our children with some free time. They cannot become good at making decisions in their lives unless they receive practice at that. And some empty time and space for their own types of play are great places for making good decisions. Here we have a couple of students at our school as well. We have Vasilisa and Mia. And it's very interesting. This was taken during golden time when the children can do almost anything they wish. They can access an iPad, they can take out a book to read, they can play board games with their friends. And what they chose to do, and I saw other children making similar decisions in other classes, was to go to the STEAM trays, those Tinker trays, take out some materials and put together some workbooks for poor children, as they termed it. And they were practicing their maths, they were practicing their STEAM skills, they had to develop the spines of those books. And I could not think of better decision making from children without any prompting from teachers that I could imagine. Of course, all the others who were going on with play, that's absolutely great. But, children can surprise you at making excellent decisions, especially when they have opportunities to practice that skill. So I thought I'd finish off by sharing one of my own experiences. I mentioned that my own son is not always interested in the types of things that I would like, such as Lego. But one thing he is interested in is lifts, is elevators. He loves pressing the buttons and going up and down. He finds it fascinating that there's such a machine. So I gave up for a little bit on the Lego, and in our house, we're almost doing a unit, you could say, on elevators. So I just, after I'd been studying a bit more about STEAM, I just went with the flow. We blue tacked some coins to the wall that were up and down buttons, and we wrote together the numbers in our bathroom. Our bathroom is now an elevator, and sometimes my son blocks access and lets us in or out depending on if we've pressed the right buttons. He tells us which floor we should be going to. He knows what's on most of the floors in our buildings, and he makes all the elevator noises going up and down. The strange thing is I've been working with him on flashcards to learn his numbers, and it was taking a while. Within just a couple of weeks of this, he knows numbers to 20 very securely now. He can recognize them in writing. He can say them in multiple languages. He knows he can start to count one more and one back depending on what floor we're on. And he can even start to pronounce the tricky ones like floor 13, which is tough for young tongues to pronounce. We live on floor 13, so that makes it helpful to practice. But how much has come out of this? We even went on a little field trip. We asked him what he wanted to do one weekend, and he just wanted to go to the top of a tall building. So off we went. Federation Tower, by the way, has free ice cream at the top of their viewing tower. So we went there on a trip. Children are free. And he just had a whale of a time, and not the way I would have predicted. The key point I would make about this is, what chance would I have had as either a teacher or a parent in having a unit on lifts or elevators in my home or at school if I hadn't just been listening and paid attention and followed his interests. But he's getting so much out of it, especially with his maths and with his communication skills, that I never would have gotten if we hadn't followed that principle of following the student's lead. So there can be so many opportunities that I couldn't even really dictate to you now, that are just inside your child's mind. And all we have to do is provide them with the resources and with the opportunities, and we can just watch them fly and take off. And we can be there for them as guides and as support as much as anything else. So that's a bit about what's going on at our school, and I hope you're excited and inspired to apply these to your own homes as well. If you do have any questions or anything you'd like to ask, we're going to leave that chat function open for a while. Or if you'd like to open up your microphones, you're welcome as well. Hope you've enjoyed the presentation today. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been very pleasant to host you here today.
Hi, is it okay to ask a question?
Sure, yes, please go ahead.
Sorry, I'm on my phone. It's hard to type and watch you at the same time. Thank you so much. That was a great Parent Academy. I just had a thought. You know, I found it when Theo and I were thinking about the home project we wanted to do for this, the one that's coming up now. We were sort of looking at what types of home project, how other people were solving it. And I thought it would be very inspiring for example, younger kids in year 3 like Theo, to see what the kids from Upper Campus sometimes do. So in the end, we were sort of watching videos about people in like the US, random teenagers building Mars lander. But I thought if this is possible, it would be nice for the younger kids to have this connection to the STEAM and the older classes.
Oh, that's a terrific idea. I'm going to write that down. Yes, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. That's part of what we were saying earlier, just when it comes to like children learning off each other and one idea sparking the next. Absolutely. And I know Upper Campus would be happy to collaborate with us on that one. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us here today. If you have any other questions, you're welcome to send us a message or email us in the future. We can include it in a little post on Seesaw when we post this video. Thanks so much for joining us. I wish you a wonderful Friday and a very happy weekend as well. Thanks a lot, and bye for now.